My guest today on the At Home podcast is Preston Sandlin with Home Inspection Carolina. Now, Home Inspection Carolina is probably one of the largest home inspection outfits in the Charlotte region, if I'm not mistaken. Are you in like Raleigh and other places yet?
Yes, we are. We are in Raleigh and Asheville.
Okay.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. I appreciate being on here.
Thank you for coming on. I mean, home inspection I think is one of those things where a lot of consumers are unaware of what a home inspection is, what home inspectors do. I think there's also some misconception about, especially if you're buying new construction.
Right.
You figure, well, the county sent an inspector, it must meet code, it's obviously fine. And I think that there is, maybe a good idea to talk about some of those concerns, but then also, some of the older houses. I mean, we live here in Charlotte.
Sure.
If you're in town, most of your houses are built between the 20s and the 60s.
Right.
There's a lot that can go on. There's no better house is an old house.
Right.
There's always what, you always, it's a good house, but it was built, 50 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Not if it wasn't maintained, right?
Right. Or, could have had some asbestos or galvanized pipes or things like that.
Exactly. Well, let's jump right in. Let's talk about
some
older houses, because I was actually I was out with a client yesterday. We were looking at some older houses, and I have had that where people have said, I don't necessarily like newer properties because I think that older places were built better. There's more solid construction, and if it has withstood the test of time,
Sure.
then it is clearly, it will continue for my family going forward. What says you, as a home inspector who's in and out of these places all the time, what are the common pitfalls you run into as you're in and out of these properties with clients on seemingly you're 3-4 home inspections a day? What are the things that you're seeing?
Sure. Well, in regards to older homes, I mean, there's pluses and minuses.
Sure.
Obviously, older home, you're more likely to get hardwood floors, brick, mature trees.
Yeah.
I mean,
can't buy tree. You can't buy mature trees.
Right. If you want new, you can go buy a new home. Everything's going to be new and everything's going to be under warranty.
Right.
But they typically bulldoze the whole area and all the trees are this high.
Right.
And not only that, this is more in the real estate perspective, but you don't get appreciation as quick typically on new homes, because why would somebody pay more for your house when they're building one just like it 3 houses down?
Absolutely.
Where an existing home, they're not building any more of those, and those lots are all built.
Right.
And typically, depending on where you are, what you're seeing is a lot of revitalization of downtown areas and areas close to downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's happening right here at the studio, where there was an urban sprawl, and there still is, but now a lot of people want to come back, and especially with the younger generation, they want to get closer to downtown.
Absolutely. They grew up in the suburbs. They don't want to. They don't want to go back where their parents were.
Right.
They want to be where it's at.
Yeah, and they don't want to deal with that traffic. So what you're seeing is a lot of people moving back to the older homes and revitalizing those. Now, to address some of the misconceptions or whatever, HTV is real, right?
No, just because they leave half their houses unlivable when they're done.
Oh yeah, I don't want to get sued or anything.
No.
But there is
great broadcast.
Yeah, my profession is portrayed in there well, now I better not get off on that.
Right.
My blood pressure. Because some things aren't exactly realistic. But, Jonathan, the thing is, all houses like cars, right? I'm a car guy. You a car guy?
Yeah, definitely.
And my dad he's, passed, but he was a big car collector, took me to car shows and things, and restored old cars.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing about old cars. I mean, they're great, fine metal and everything, but tires, belts, hoses, they wear out. Transmissions,
sure.
You show me a 1957 Thunderbird or 1957, that was a great year, by the way.
Right.
1957 Chevy.
Sure.
I'm going to show you a car that doesn't have the original tires, doesn't have the original belts, doesn't have the original hoses, because things wear out. I mean, they don't last forever. And it's the same thing with a house. Your water heater, your furnace, roof, they don't last forever, and they've got to be replaced.
Right.
And typically when we inspect an older home, that everything that wears out is at some point on its life expectancy.
Sure.
Like I said, you could buy a brand new house, and that's great. Everything's under warranty.
You're back
Everything's
at zero.
brand new. Now we do find things wrong with it, but
We'll get into that.
Yeah. The great thing is everything's new. Now, if you buy an older home, I'm looking at water heater, roof, and I'm an investor,
Sure.
in rental houses.
Yep.
Roof, furnace, water heater, piping, wiring, things wear out. And I'm always looking at where is this thing on its life expectancy. And you buy an older home, typically you're going to have a couple, you might have a new furnace, but that roof's 19 years old.
Sure.
That's just the mixed bag you're going to have. But the trade-off is you're going to have a house that's probably, depending on where you are and what part of the country, but it's going to appreciate a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some things that, and things change. I mean, it's crazy. Hardwoods now, they're the thing, but everybody had hardwoods in the 50s and 60s. And then when carpet came out, only rich people had carpet.
Yeah, exactly.
And they covered over those hardwoods.
So smooth.
Yeah, and now, you had to pay a lot of money to get real hardwoods. I mean, it's crazy expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And you buy an older house, it's there. You might have to pull up the carpet and sand it and refinish it, but
Sure.
It's there. So, people ask me, old, new. I mean, there's trade-offs, and it depends on where you are, where you are in life. I mean, if you buy an older home, you're going to have some expenses with, the things are going to, because everything's not.
What do you think? What is the common thing you think that most buyers are unaware of when they go into looking at a place that's maybe 50, 60, or even 30 years old? Like, is it bad plumbing? Is it, do you see more infestations that are like termites and
that sort of thing.
woodboring insects? I mean, what are kind of some of the things that you find on a regular basis that you think most people need to kind of plan for in their budget when they're looking at some of these properties?
It could be all the above.
Okay.
Chances are that, you show me a house and there's usually, just like my report card, there's a few things that are good and a few things not so good.
Right.
So, you can have, you show me a 50-year-old house, Jonathan,
Right.
I'm going to show you a house that had termites.
Okay.
Now, did they treat them?
Yeah.
I'm going to look
When
for the
did they
drill
treat 'em?
marks. Is it under warranty? That sort of thing. You show me a 50-year-old house, I'm going to show you a house that doesn't have the original, but how old is that furnace?
Mm-hmm.
How old is that air conditioner? And we might get into air conditioning.
Yeah, let's
later. If it's more than 10 years old. But I do think the misconception maybe that, and I don't want to characterize anybody, but you have somebody who's maybe a professional, that is not in the trades, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're more of a computer, and golly, somebody's got
The engineer.
some hate meal.
The engineer dad.
Yeah. Or
Who shows up, or the uncle, and he says, I'm going to show you a house. I'm going to go through it and play home inspector for the client.
Right.
You've probably had that before.
Oh, yeah.
I've had that before.
Yeah.
And you go like, I appreciate what you're doing here.
They
But-
did heat and air 10 years ago.
Right.
Oh, yeah, well, he's going to follow you around, all right?
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. And they probably know a lot about one particular thing, but they typically, now some do, but they don't know, usually I win those guys over.
Sure.
In the beginning, they're kind of like, we're both a little bit,
Exactly.
But,
That's sort of alpha.
yeah. And I'll usually defer to them and ask them, like an electrician, well, tell me about what you know about wiring, blah, blah, blah. And, and they do know some stuff, but they might not know what years some things changed or what to look for. And, by the end of the inspection, I'm showing them about moisture and termites and some other things. And, usually we win them over. We're all there for the client. I mean, you're there for the client.
Absolutely.
I'm there for the client. We're not there to win a peeing contest. Sorry, I hope that was okay to say that.
Just mark it NSFW. So
there you go.
all right. So older houses, I guess, budget for things because you're going to have usually what you're going to have the cast iron plumbing.
Yeah.
So it'll give you a little bit of rust every time you turn on the faucet, right?
Yeah,
You're going to have probably the cast iron sewer that's going to rust, and then you can't flush every once in a while.
And then you got the large tree in the yard that the
That's-
roots
that's
are
the roots.
gonna wrap around that thing, and hey, why is it not going down the drain?
Exactly.
Because the root has put a python hole on that thing.
And those are not cheap to
No,
replace that.
no.
No, you're talking, $10,000-$15,000 sometimes to hook it up if you had to
You're gonna have
replug
to
things.
dig it up, man. The front yard.
And there goes your tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had that. I've had that on a rental house once around the thing here. And you're right. It was not a fun day.
What do you think about, like, I know we're still seeing a lot of houses, a lot of older properties still. with aluminum wiring.
Right.
That's still an issue. You don't have a lot, like, I think the most common thing I run into, because I always go, whenever I'm looking at a house, especially that's older, one of the first things I go to is electrical panel.
Right.
Not that I know what I'm looking at, but I know an old one from a new one,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm like, okay, if I see a newer panel, that usually clues in that somebody did some improvement over time.
Right.
And then the next thing that I'm cluing into are the outlets as I'm walking around. If I see a bunch of two-prong, no grounds,
Right.
I'm going, okay, there may be something here that I need to look for. So what are some things that you think as a buyer, as you're walking around, that they could be kind of keying on that would maybe help them in their determination, could help them even when they're negotiating their offer? Because a lot of sellers haven't done a pre-inspection, so they don't know. Like, it's going to be a big question mark when you come in
Right.
and do your inspection anyway.
Right. Well, let me go with your example there of the electric system.
Sure.
You know, you go back, they used to only have 60 amp boxes, then 100 amp boxes. And the thing is, you know, in the 1950s, they just didn't have the appliances that we have today.
Sure.
You know, the big TV and the entertainment center and the washing machine. They just didn't have all that. I mean, my first house is 1950s house, and I was the dishwasher. Well, my wife had this deal. When I was learning how to dishwash, and I figured out I need to learn how to cook. So,
Right.
but the thing is, so they had to modernize, you know, because otherwise, and then that house that we were in, built in 1957, we kept flipping breakers because, you know, we had a toaster oven and a hairdryer, and that house wasn't built during those times. So we were, you know, you could hear it humming.
Oh yeah.
So we had to have it updated. So that's a pretty common thing that it's going to have to be updated. If you get into the time of the Vietnam War, which is the 60s up to 72, that was when they started using aluminum wiring. Now, let me preface this by saying, when we talk about a problem with aluminum wiring, we're only talking about the 110, 120s. We're not talking about the multi-strand, you know, the 220s and 240s. They're fine. They still use that today.
Right, they do.
Yeah, the problem with the aluminum wiring on the 110 and 120s is it'll arc where it connects, either at the outlet or at the box. Now, it's not a problem like in the middle of the wire. You don't have to rewire a whole house because it has aluminum wiring. It's just where it connects to the outlet, it can move over time. And, you know, when it moves and if it disconnects a little bit, well, have you ever jump started a car when it's not, when you connected that last wire?
Oh, yeah.
You know, well, it's the same thing if it comes off loose. So there is a fix for it. And let me go back to say the aluminum wiring, again, 1960s up to about 72. You see it. You don't have to rewire the whole house.
Sure.
There's three different methods. Basically, most of them involve pigtailing each outlet to some copper. You know, on a solid connector where the copper actually connects.
Really?
Yeah, it's like $15 an outlet.
Wow.
I mean, you know, average size house, you probably, you know, some stuff in the box, maybe, you know, $600-700. But if this is the right house, right schools, dream house, it's
absolutely.
I mean, the point I hope to drive home to anybody is every house has something.
They all do.
But there's usually a workaround.
Yeah.
Don't you
it's
know?
all sticks, bricks, and money.
Yeah, exactly. There's a workaround for aluminum wiring. There's a workaround for asbestos. There's a workaround for polybutylene piping. That's another problem in the 80s.
Sure. Well, I have polybutylene in my house.
Yeah. Okay.
And it is funny because I do see realtors when they get your report. So polybutylene piping is the gray pipes that were very popular
in the 80s.
Late 80s and up to about mid
90s. Yep.
And so you see it come in the reports,
right.
And I always see a lot of times where agents will key on, and then of course I know a lot of home inspectors will send a little warning like this stuff it's waiting to explode in the wall as we speak. Like, you're lucky that you didn't get right out of here on a flood, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I always go like, well, my house is, you know, 30-something years old now. Like, my walls haven't exploded, but I also understand, like, you know, you kind of want to be somewhat mindful when I'm doing improvements to maybe it's time to get rid of the gray pipes. But talk about polybutylene.
Yeah, and like you
it's
said,
very common.
Yeah, like you said, it was used in the 80s. I mean, the whole thing with building materials in the aluminum, that was used, let me back up for a second, because of the Vietnam War.
Sure.
Copper was at a premium. It was so expensive. That's why
with
So
aluminum,
cost usually drives things.
Absolutely.
And before polybutylene, they used copper piping. I mean, you get a house in the 70s. I love copper piping. I mean, that's like 100 years. It'll
Sure.
last. But you know,
It's too cold.
yeah, and it got too expensive, and
Sure.
and copper thieves too.
And
That's a
everybody's
whole-
good luck having a house with it.
Yeah, we can talk about that. I got a couple stories on that. But anyway, so they started using polybutylene, which
Mhm.
whenever you have poly, it's basically petroleum or plastic.
Absolutely.
And that's what the poly is. And you know, there were then polyethylene and VC, all poly products.
Sure.
So okay, so there were two problems with polybutylene. The first one was the connectors.
Mhm.
They had these aluminum connectors, and they would just pop, and
Wow.
the supply line. You know, you're at work and your house is filling up with water.
Sure.
You know, it's fish tank. That was horrible, and they only used that for about 2 years.
Okay.
Fortunately, they fixed that right away. I mean, you know, it was a class action lawsuit. And then they used polybutylene with copper connectors, and for another 12, 15 years. But what they found out was that if you lived in a city, which we do, your water's chlorinated, it's treated, and that chlorinated water makes the pipes brittle over time,
Yeah.
and it'll cause it to crack and whatnot. So, you know, and eventually we went to some PEX and other things,
Right.
and there's
Which
some
installed
stuff
improperly
Yeah.
can also have the same problems.
Yeah, if it's out in the sun for any amount of time before they install it, it doesn't have a support every 2 feet. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But, you know, here's the thing. People ask me, would you buy a house with polybutylene piping? Yes, I would. But a couple of things, caveats. I would first check to make sure it's second generation, not that first generation
Sure.
with the aluminum. And I forgot to say, so it was not just aluminum connectors, it was polybutylene elbows and T's. And then second generation, they went to copper elbows and T's and copper connectors, which was
Right.
much, much better. But I would check it to make sure it's second generation, check for leaks everywhere. And then probably what I would do is put some sort of water conditioning system on the house to take out some of that chlorine.
Interesting.
Yeah, and you can get those $500-600.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to enter into, you know, and this is more Jonathan's area of expertise with real estate. You know, people ask me what has to be fixed. Well, nothing. Everything's negotiable.
Sure.
It's going to be hard if you're in that situation. If I was buying the house, I would buy it and I would just do that myself. I can't really make the seller fix something
Like,
that
it's not
isn't
broken.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, just because I want to. But so yeah, that's kind of, you know, I actually did a podcast the other day on what has to be fixed.
Right.
And technically nothing. I mean, nothing really has to be. You know, I'm not encroaching on, but you know, the seller wants to sell the house.
Sure.
The buyer wants to buy the house, and the buyer could lose their due diligence. It always is a negotiation.
Right.
It's always a negotiation, and you know, I've seen it all. I've seen sellers fix everything and then some.
Sure.
And then I've seen other sellers tell them to, you know, take a long walk off a short pier. You're
Well, I
already
mean,
getting it
it
too.
depends on the market, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and the price.
If a seller knows that they have a line of people out the door that
Right.
will come in tomorrow.
I'm not fixing all that
Yeah,
stuff.
you don't have to. You know, you're not as motivated to make repairs, but then you also have, I think for a lot of folks, if you get the laundry list of items from the inspector,
Right.
and you now take it to the seller, think about like what were the items that we weren't able to physically see with our eyes, like, you know, we if there was a leak under a sink and it's serious, or there's damage as a result from it, or if you had a situation where, you know, there was, you know, a roof leak or foundation issue, like these are serious items that have to get resolved. Those definitely are ones that you do. But if it were something where you walk into a house and you go like, well, I already saw that was a problem, and you probably kind of build that in your mindset of like, well, I'm gonna have to fix this at some point. Then those are the things that you kind of can hit the brakes on. I think you kind of can go a long way too with a seller.
Sure.
If you are not throwing
Every
laundry
single
list,
thing. Yeah, I want that.
because people get really upset. You know,
I
like,
want
what
that.
do you think I'm doing
Light
here?
plate tighten down.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're kind of like,
tighten that outlet.
Usually it's a compromise. I mean,
You're right.
most of the time it's kind of like you have this laundry list of stuff, And everybody's threshold's different. You have to talk, but I usually say go for any major ticket item or safety issue.
Absolutely.
If you've got small children, and your banister's not safe, that's a big issue. But now, the single person bachelor, that banister may not be as big an issue as something else, but
unless you're the type that doesn't fix things,
Yeah.
in which case you probably should get the banister fixed.
Right.
Because when I come in to sell it, I'm going to be like, "Why's your banister on the floor?"
Exactly. Why is it like shaky wicky?
Right.
But yeah, compromise is usually what you see, and you're right. It can go a long way. And I don't want to step on the real estate, but I've seen a lot of stuff, and what I've seen that's been most successful is when they say, "Look, here's all the stuff the guy found. This is what we are asking for," which isn't all of it, and that, like you said, goes a long way to the seller, because the seller should expect some things. I mean, you're in a good real estate agent like yourself, we'll tell them, we'll prep them. We're going to ask this
Surprise.
now, whatever. And
love surprise.
Yeah.
Always works really well.
Yeah. Surprises aren't good in real estate.
No.
Typically, that is, surprises in other areas of life, but not real estate. But that's usually why I recommend a pre-inspection.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
So a common trend that I think started coming out maybe
Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
Big.
I mean, when the real estate market started really getting hot, you started to see, especially in a lot of markets, where I think to me, it always you see trends start in real tech heavy markets.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it kind of makes its way out. So
yeah.
Seattle, Portland, Dallas, Texas, Los Angeles.
Right.
And so you started seeing the pre-home inspection.
Yeah.
And I know you've been an evangelist on the pre-home inspection for a long time. And it's something that I have encouraged a lot of sellers to do.
Right.
Most don't take my advice because there's
the cost.
There's a cost involved. There's also the concern of
going through it twice.
Yep. And then there is, well, what if we find something that I'm not aware of? To which I always say,
it's going to come out
anyway.
Yeah.
You might as well address it beforehand at your cost on your time, as
and
opposed
get multiple bids.
Absolutely, instead of a buyer saying, "Well, I got the most expensive guy in town to come in here and make this repair." So,
and I want a cost off the price that expensive
I
guy.
might not even buy this house.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk around pre-home inspection. Who should get a pre-home inspection, and what does it look like? Why would somebody want to do this?
Sure. Well, I'll preface this by saying I'm a little biased because
it's like your home inspector.
Yeah, exactly. I think pre-inspections are a great idea because, like you said, they're to eliminate surprises.
Mm-hmm.
See, the problem with the way the normal home inspection goes down is it's typically after a financial compromise has come.
Right.
Usually, there's a back and forth. Seller comes down a little bit, buyer comes up a little bit. They both feel like, well, I'm come down as much as I can go.
I've done that.
Yeah, and
I can make my plans.
So
I can
they're
move forward.
Yeah, they're very, they've locked in on this number, both of them. And now you get the home inspection. There's $5,000 or $6,000 worth of repairs need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So now, somebody's going to have to compromise again, and they've already compromised.
Right.
And a lot of times sellers like, I'd never come down on my price if I would have known that.
That's
or
right.
buyers like, So the problem is, to me, is the timing of when a normal inspection is.
Sure.
If you had that further upstream, we found out about those $5,000 or $6,000 worth of repairs. Maybe we could have got it done cheaper or adjusted the price or something, or we wouldn't have had a negotiation to begin with, and everybody wouldn't have wasted their time. We'd have found another house. It's just people got time invested, and now there's a landmine we just stepped on. Let's clear the land of landmines by doing a pre-inspection.
Right.
Find out what the problems are ahead of time. Now, let me address the two objections, which you nailed them. Is the cost. Sellers like,
how much does it usually cost?
Well, it's usually about the same as a normal inspection, $450.
$450,
depending on the square footage.
Right.
The cost, and then going through it twice. The seller's like, wait a minute, let me get this straight, Jonathan. You want me to pay money for this guy to come in here and call my baby ugly, and then I'm gonna fix all this stuff, spend money,
Absolutely.
and then the buyer's gonna bring in their inspector and call my baby ugly again, and now I gotta fix it again. Exactly. Yeah, really? You want me to do that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let me address those objections, if that's
Please.
okay.
No, definitely.
And I'll do them in reverse order. Let me talk about going through it twice.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing is setting expectations. And what I mean by that is I can go behind any home inspector. Any home inspector can come behind me and find small stuff.
Always.
The cosmetic. I mean, it's a subjective thing.
Right.
I mean, it's like an essay test. If we took an essay test, our answers would not be the exact same.
Right.
I might hit on a few points you didn't. You might hit on a few points, but hopefully we hit on the major points.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, definitely.
So the purpose of a pre-inspection is just to identify any landmines, any deal killing,
Sure.
blow-ups. It's not to identify, rubbing doors, sticking window, unless it's structural damage or something. But not the minor things. So no deal is going to go south because the doorbell didn't work. But a deal will go south if the shower pan's rotten and there's $5,000 worth of damage nobody expected.
Right.
So that's setting expectations. I think in the beginning say, hey, I think you should do this pre-inspection, but I'm going to tell you now, there's going to be small stuff their buyer's going to come in. If they find something big behind us, we'll refund their money for the inspection.
Okay.
I mean, like over $1,500.
Sure.
Now the second part, do we have time? Or we
Keep going. No,
okay.
You're good.
The second part is the cost.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen different things. We came up with a program at Home Inspection Carolina where it kind of modeled after Carfax. And in fact, that's where we got the idea. Me and another inspector, I actually bought a car sight unseen. First time I ever did that.
Yeah.
I read the Carfax, got a really good deal, got it shipped in. It was cool, man.
Nervous.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, I just like the people that have had that bought houses sight unseen, and I'm going like, what do you? Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
You're probably an investor,
I don't-
or
yeah.
you're just like whatever. You thought the pictures were that good, but man, that makes me really nervous.
Yeah. I don't recommend sight unseen. Do go see it, but if there was a report that's been under the hood,
Well, see, I always think of like, and not to get too far off tangent, because I'm really good at that. But
me too.
but it's like
I got some bills for that.
exactly. But I always think like realtors will show. We market the things that are marketable,
Right.
and we won't show you the stuff that's not marketable.
Right.
So if there's like a power tower in the backyard that's like the substation off the corner,
Camera angle just right.
right? Like or the airplanes that are like lining like right off of the runway, like
Or that this is a cut through between two major highways.
on a nice quiet street that's actually a highway. We won't show you those things, or at least a lot of agents won't. And so as a result, you end up getting it can be a little misleading. And so
Right.
I'd be my only concern, and people do it all the time. And I'm like, God bless you.
Yeah.
I guess you'll be calling me when you don't like it. Maybe I guess that's a good thing.
Nah, you do a good job, Jonathan. You're aware.
So tell me though, we were back on pre-inspection though, and you were saying,
Sure. Well, the idea is to the cost.
Right,
That was one of the
absolutely.
objections. So we thought, well, what if we could do a pre-inspection on this house and also do a re-inspection if they fix some stuff,
Yeah.
load up the report and make it for sale for
That's awesome.
$20.
Okay.
So, and we put a sign in the yard. You can put it on the MLS wherever that you can download the report by going to
Mhm.
this, texting a number, and it's for $19.95.
Right.
And that money goes back to the seller because it's their report. That they're selling it. We're just providing the platform.
Sure.
So, and then the other thing is, the potential buyer's information comes into you,
Sure.
so you can follow up with that buyer as well for your seller and do a good job. Hey, is there anything I can help you out? Can I tell you about the amenities? Can I tell you about the schools? Because I know you're, well, so you can help the seller out. But the goal is to eliminate that landmine that we were
Mhm.
talking about, that surprise, because surprises in real estate are not good usually.
Right.
So, but if we could offset those costs and set expectations, I think it would be a better, people say, oh, that home inspector's a deal killer. And I think it's the timing of when we do the inspection. If we could reset that a little bit. But I encourage 2 inspections. I do. It's not like I want the pre-inspection to take the place of a buyer's inspection, because things can happen, mechanically.
Sure.
The air conditioner.
Stuff happens all the time.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to sell a house.
But if you think
Stuff
about
breaks.
it, yeah, you typically have 2 real estate agents in a transaction. You go
Sure.
to court, you have 2 lawyers.
Right.
And quite honestly, I have seen some sellers get taken advantage of because, maybe not the home inspector, whatever, but they took that report, and you alluded to it earlier, they got the highest priced person that they could to give estimates,
Yeah.
and then they want a price reduction on that. And
Or like life's changed. Like they've already made plans, whether they're moving out or they've already got another house under contract. Now you're in the crunch of I've got to do something here, and so you're not always necessarily doing what's in your best interest financially. It's what's in your best interest at the moment to like for expediency,
Right.
and that the two are not always
Right.
congruent. It's interesting, I think that whenever I get a house and it's pre-inspected, I always feel like that somebody has at least taken the time to open themselves up to allow it, and I feel like it gives a lot of confidence from the buyer's perspective that the house is at least been inspected, probably well maintained, because somebody's willing to open the door
Sure,
and let inspector
exactly.
in. They're not usually ashamed of all the stuff that they've
Right,
done.
right.
There's usually that guy that could be really proud that he may be the candiest homeowner.
Comes out with all his owner's manuals of all his appliances.
Here's
Like,
every
this is
receipt
gonna,
I bought.
this is going to be a tight house.
Yeah,
and we all like that. We
Yeah.
all like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're exactly right. And when I go into a house that's been pre-inspected, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to find anything, but I absolutely positive there's more of a chance that this house is going to be a little bit tighter because they're willing to open it up and they're willing to, I'm going to find some small stuff, but that's just nature. But I just think it's like you said, if you're a buyer, okay, and you're looking at two houses, house A, house B, and let's say house A has been pre-inspected and house B hasn't. You love both of them. Well, there's a due diligence you put down that you can, it's kind of like layaway. I think
Sure.
I know millennials are out there. Layaway, what's that?
Yeah.
But it's old folks know
It's
what
cost of
layaway is.
business,
Yeah,
right.
it's like you put a little bit of money down on a product, but
Right.
in exchange for that, they take it off the shelf.
Sure.
Nobody else can buy it,
Right.
and you have a certain amount of time that you pay the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't pay the rest of it, you lose that. And that was, but that, they took it off the market. They could have sold it to somebody else.
Sure.
It's kind of the same thing with due diligence. So there is a chance of losing your due diligence. There's an advantage and disadvantage. But if I'm a buyer and there's a house that's been pre-inspected, I'm thinking there's less. Following up what you said, there's less of a chance that I'm going to lose my due diligence there than one that hasn't been pre-inspected. If that
Sure.
makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. So coming up, I want to talk with you about new construction.
Okay.
Because it seems like that there's there's always this misconception, new house, perfect house.
Yeah.
And I would love to get your perspective on it as a home inspector who's seen all kinds of stuff, especially on new construction. And you can give us kind of some of your feedback.
Sure.